I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I want you to do when it comes to welding with the stick welders or welding with the MIG welders, or as far as that goes, welding with the oxyacetylene. What you'll want to do for a grade is, here's what you're going to have. You're going to have 3 or 4 things right here. You're going to have you're going to run a bead. Then you're going to, on the same group of metal, you will run a butt weld. That's a butt weld. Then with the same group of metal, you will run a lap weld. And then with all of that, then you will run a T-weld. Okay? So you'll run a bead, a butt, a lap, and a T. And then all 4 of those welds will be handed in as for one grade. When we finally get started right here, and we'll get started Monday, for the first turn, we'll probably just practice weld. So you'll just get here and do some practice welding. Okay. This metal here is the 3/16. The other metal that you'll use for gas is the 1/8 inch. So the gas is just a little bit lighter. A little bit about the rod. This is a quick introduction to the welding rod. This is still a mild steel rod, and it has a coating on the outside. And what that coating does is, as it burns off, it burns off rapidly expanding gases, and those rapidly expanding gases create a little envelope that protect the weld from oxides and nitrides in the atmosphere. So therefore, that's where you get a pure field. The only thing that's different about most of the welding rods is simply the coating on the outside, and that's denoted in these in the number. What we're going to be welding with mostly is a 6013, and a quick introduction to a rod, meaning what that number means is an E60 or the E6013. The E simply means electrode. The 60, you take that times 1,000, and that's the tensile strength per square inch of the rod. So it's 60,000 pounds per square inch of tensile strength. The 1 tells us that it can be used for all positions, flat, horizontal, and overhead. And the 3 in combination with 1 tells us something about the coating on the outside. So common rods that you will be using, or that most people use, is a 6010. It uses 6011, 6013, some 7018, and some 7024 are kind of the common ones. Okay. When I'm welding, the big deal, I think the biggest secret I've found is when I'm going to weld a bead or whatever I'm welding, I'm going to put the electrode in, and I want to stay the electrode in relationship to the metal at a 5 to 15 in the direction of travel. And if I remember that, I can make it less of an angle, or I might make it a little bit more of an angle, but I want to pull it in the direction of travel. If I remember that, then, if I'm going to do a horizontal weld, 5 to 15 in the direction of travel, and since I'm on a horizontal, I might be angling it up just a few degrees also. If it seems like it's not penetrating, or if it's not cooling properly and it wants to run on me, what I found out that I just simply flatten that angle out a little bit, and it works a lot better, especially for out of position welding. In your flat welding, it will be the 5 to 15 in the direction of travel. Some of you will weld more, or a little bit more, some of it will be a little bit less. Now, if I'm a little bit more, what happens is the flame will flare back and not allow the metal to solidify. And if that's a problem, get the angle just a little bit less. Even overhead. What I do, if I'm going overhead, I go 5 to 15 in the direction of travel. If the molten metal is not solidifying fast enough, I'll flatten that angle out just a little bit. Okay? A couple other things to start the electrode or start welding. There's 2 methods. One's called scratching and the other one's called scratching and dragging. To drag an electrode to start it, and I'm probably not going to weld right here today, but to start this electrode, I can drag it along and raise it up slightly. How much? I want to raise and carry and weld with this electrode about the thickness of the electrode. This is 1/8 of an inch, and so when I start it, I'm going to drag it, and then I'm going to raise it up to about that 1/8 of an inch. And then that gives me an arc gap. Here's what's going to happen to a lot of you. You'll scratch it along and it will stick, okay? And it will stick, and you'll probably get a little frustrated. And then what will happen is some of this coating on the outside will flake away, and you're really going to have a hard time getting it started. The best way I've found, just drag it several different times until you get that rod burnt off where it's even with the flux. Then once you can go again to drag it and then raise it up slightly. If worst case scenario is just put that rod down or take that rod out and start with a new one. There's a dragging technique, and then raise it to get it started. The other technique is just simply tapping down. Tap and then raise it right back up. So I'll tap down and raise up to 1/8 of an inch, and then I'll start welding. As I get to the end of the weld, my travel speed will have to increase a little bit quicker because it'll burn off the metal right here. That's just another little tip. All right. A couple other things. What else can I tell to you a little bit about? And that's probably all you'll really need. Well, I know what I want to tell you. When I'm holding this, what's going to happen is you're going to get real shaky, and some people will even, how do they put their electrode in their electrode holder? Some people, when they're starting with a new electrode, will be almost like this, so that they can actually get it down and start it down. Now notice I don't have any gloves on right now, but I'm anchored here to the table with this hand right here. And that just kind of gives me something steady to go by. Much like we were talking about with the gas welder. If you have a hand down to steady yourself, okay? And then as it burns away, I might readjust this to wherever I want it to have, or have my electrode adjusted to wherever I want it. Anyway, so I think the important thing to remember is keep an anchor down. Some people even do this, and I've done this also. When I start welding, I'll even grip it. I'll grip the rod right here, and all this hand do is holding the electrode holder, and I'll do my weaving back and forth slightly with this hand right here as I'm sliding it up and down right like that. That works out really good. You're gonna have to kind of find your own niche to a certain degree, okay? But the things to remember is, 5 to 15 in the direction of travel. Okay. Now, weave pattern. Some people like to weave in circles. The textbooks will tell you to weave in circles. Some of the textbooks will tell you to weave back and forth, maybe 1/8 of an inch back and forth, maybe 1/4 of an inch back and forth. Okay. Whatever you do, you want to make sure you keep your electrode ahead of the puddle. I had the old welder here in town when I was young, and he told me, I was doing some welding, and he was watching me. He said, "Don't worry about weaving at all. Probably you're going to be shaken enough to supply enough of a weave pattern until you get used to it." So he said, keep the tip right in the puddle, and just almost like running a stringer. That would be a stringer bead. Okay, and then the weld puddle itself will get large enough, and it will bind the two metals together. So the weave pattern I have found, my best weave pattern is either one of two ways: holding that tip right in the puddle and advancing it along, or slightly back and forth motion. I've never had a lot of luck with the circle motion. Okay. So that's a little bit on weave. There's other weave patterns, and I'm not even going to go into that. Okay, but this will get you started. This welder here that I'm hooked up right now, we will weld with DC reverse polarity. DC reverse polarity would be electrode positive. Okay. The other two, the AC, it doesn't really make any difference because it's alternating current. All right. So come Monday when we get going, What you're gonna do is get on the cut-off machine and cut several pieces and start just practicing. Not gonna necessarily take any grades Monday, but we'll just start practicing. And then a little bit later in the week, we'll start taking grades or get one round through. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay.